And we are here with our first, second show of the week sort of thing. We've got Robyn from Locked On Utah Hockey Podcast. Thanks so much for talking with us
Of course, glad to be here. I'm always happy to talk hockey.
today. Perfect. So let's get into it. Utah had a lot of changes in the offseason in terms of like signings and just roster moves. What are some of the most notable ones that you're excited for, or even ones that weren't like big splash draft day
Right.
signings that you're excited for?
I mean, I think the one a lot of people have wanted to discuss and hear about is the trade for Mikhail Sergachev. I feel like on that draft day, I feel like all of Sphere Las Vegas just held an entire audible gasp when they heard Utah had acquired Mikhail Sergachev for a couple of prospects, really. And I think it was a huge pick. They picked up a guy who really is now the blue line for the Utah Hockey Club. Utah didn't have a blue line. I mean, they had Sean Dursey and and a couple other guys, but they didn't. Other than that, they didn't really have a blue line. So how do they fix that? They picked up a guy like Mikhail Sergachev, who, to be fair, he did have some injury issues, but really has shown to have some really high potential, really good potential when he played with Tampa Bay.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Is there anybody sort of in the Utah Hockey Club pipeline that you're excited that, hopes maybe get a little bit more seen throughout the season, or just you're excited for them in the future?
Yeah, I think, and I feel like a lot of people will probably agree with me on this one. A lot of Utah fans, maybe a lot of former Arizona fans, when I mentioned this guy's name and Josh Doan, he got a little bit of a glimpse of Josh Doan towards the end of the season last year in Arizona, and now you're probably gonna see a little more from him. He might come up and down between Utah and Tucson, but Doan is really making some strides forward. I got a chance to watch a little bit of him during preseason, watched him in the Calder Cup playoffs this last summer, and honestly, I feel like he is due. And I feel like so many people are eventually, the few years' time, are really going to know his name. They already know the last name, but they'll know the first name, Josh Doan, rather than just Shane Doan. And I think I can't wait until we get to see a lot more from him. It's gonna be fun. Honestly, he's one of my favorite players. Really nice guy to talk to too. So I'm like, I've been rooting for him for a while.
Nice. Do you see, like you said, you see him kind of making appearances? Do you see him kind of coming up when, a couple of injuries happen, or kind of maybe later in the season once they're a little bit more established in terms of the feel of the team?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both of that, actually. I think if he'll come up if an injury, if like let's say Kevin Stenlin, he's who I project to be the fourth line center for Utah. Let's say he goes out with an injury, they need another fourth line center. It's like, all right, I can trust Doan. Doan has proven himself to be ready at the NHL level. He gets called up and gets those minutes. But he'll really spend a lot of time, like kind of almost, I wouldn't say an equal amount of time. He's going to spend most of the time in Tucson, but towards the end of the year, he'll get that call up again before eventually getting sent back down for some Calder Cup time, because that's probably where he's going to be when the playoffs hit.
Makes sense. Speaking of injuries, I know Utah's got a couple of guys out going into the beginning of the regular season. Do you see that, having a huge effect on the team, or maybe not so much?
I don't think so at this moment. I mean, at least the two big names where their injuries right now are, they're pretty well-known names for what the acquisitions were over the offseason or carry over from last season with Arizona. John Marino is not going to be ready for the for the beginning, but I think Utah maybe kind of knew that going in. They picked up Robert Bortuzzo to kind of maybe potentially fill in. He's done serviceable too, done a really fine job for Utah in the preseason so far, and I think he'll probably fill the shoes enough until Marino's healthy. And for Nick Bukestad, that is to me a little bit of a bigger blow of a loss. But to me, I'm not worried about that one.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just because Utah has proven to have so many really, really strong forwards this year. I've been like watching Dylan Gunther go off in the preseason. What Clayton Keller, new captain now. Clayton Keller. I'm not worried. The goals are still going to come. Once Bukestad is healthy, it just makes things even more. It's like, all right, we can easily move a lot more efficiently now, so we can kind of swap players in, so you're less risk of an injury down the road once he comes back.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Speaking of your new captain, I imagine you were pretty excited when the news came out. Were you surprised that it was that it came this soon, or were you kind of expecting that they were going to name it before the regular season?
It's interesting because I actually I was asking this question going into this offseason. I was like, what do they do? When they were in Arizona, they were in no rush, right? They were like, yeah, we don't need to worry about that. We're still in the rebuild. They have a leadership group, and that's all that really matters. And I think one of the things that kind of probably pushed the scale up a little bit is kind of a couple things. One is Keller's already proven himself as a leader. He's worn the A for the last few years, and he's proven that he can be one of the best players, in addition to coaching these young guys and being what a captain should be. But two, I feel like Utah kind of already knew, Andre Tourigny and Bill Armstrong and the rest, and all of Utah, the Utah organization knew that they didn't want to go into an inaugural year in this new city without a captain. They looked at, even though Vegas came swinging right out without a captain, they were fine. They didn't want to do that. They didn't want to do also Seattle and not have a captain in their first years. I know those are expansion teams, so it's a different situation, but I feel like it still applies because you're going into a new city, completely new. You want something people can be excited for. Why not? In what better way than to just go and say, hey, here's our captain, Clayton Keller. And again, I couldn't be happier. He was on my short list of about really only two names who I think who would have made a phenomenal captain.
Who was the other one on the list?
Lawson Krause. It was like I was teetering between Keller or Krause this entire offseason. Like, who would I want more? Who would be more vocal in the locker room? I was like, I think Krause would do that, but Keller is here in this level of leadership. He's more of an on-ice leadership. It really was like I was going back and forth. So I was happy either way and be like, whoever it was going to be.
Nice. Perfect. One more final question. What going into the regular season for Utah's inaugural year, what are your sort of expectations or predictions for how the beginning of the season will go for this team?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I feel like this team is, because they have a lot of new guys, they are going to maybe take a few games or so finding their footing together as a team. Also, new city, figuring out how maybe the fans react to their dynamic there. There's going to be a lot of figuring things out. But I also think that this team is going to be a lot more competitive. This team is going to be an incredibly competitive team. They've built so much already from, again, the previous years in Arizona. And it's kind of at that point where they're coming out of a rebuild just barely. That emerging period of a rebuild where they really could probably try to push for a playoff spot. Maybe not quite in, like, on the inside yet, but they're going to be on that push. They're going to be like right on the outside, surprising people. Like, how are they here for so long? And they're going to be right around there. They won't finish in the playoffs. Like I said, they won't make it in, but they'll be right there, kind of with the rest of them, with the rest of that crew right on the bubble.
Awesome. The light at the end of the tunnel is a lot more vibrant now going into this season.
Oh, and yeah, and the buzz is there. Utah cannot wait for that to happen.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for talking with us. You want to take a second and plug your show? Tell our listeners how they can find you guys.
Yeah, you can follow the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast wherever you get your shows. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, Google. We're ad free on on Amazon Music if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber. And then on social media, we're at LO_NHL Utah. And then I'm personally at Robyn_Leano.
Perfect. Thanks so much for talking with us today.
Of course.
Okay. We've heard from the Utah people. Now you're going to get a old reporter. This is my reporter wear. So we'll basically just go over a couple quick things with the Winnipeg Jets. The Hawks will play Friday. Not much has changed for the Winnipeg Jets. Basically the same exact team as last year. I've got no places to tell people to go in Winnipeg. I've never been to Winnipeg. The only change is Brosette, who is now on the Blackhawks, out, and Kapanen, who used to play for San Jose, then got traded to the Devils at the end of the year, is in as a backup. The only reason this is relative is there's no back-to-backs for Winnipeg, but there's still the possibility that they play the backup against the Hawks just because, well, they can. That's all we have on Winnipeg. Hopefully we'll get somebody from the Jets organization for the next one. Edmonton, who will be the Saturday game. Edmonton will be playing back-to-back Saturday and Sunday. So I also would assume there's a good chance the Hawks get Pickard, Edmonton's backup, instead of Skinner. The only silver lining with having a really bad team that can't score is it's a good chance for other teams to rest their top goaltender. So, we might get lucky and not see their top goaltender a bunch. Edmonton, a good amount of movement, adds and subtractions. The main cast is still there. Your main players, your Evan Bouchard, Draisaitl, McDavid, all those guys are still there. People that they lost, as we've talked about a couple times, Dylan Holloway and Broberg on this show, they're both gone. Cody Ceci, who's also a defenseman. Desjardins, who's also a defenseman. Jack Campbell, who just kind of went there. And so they lost 3 defensemen. They also lost, I guess what you would call them is bit player forwards, Ryan McLeod, Warren Foegele, and Carrick. So that's another 3 guys. Basically people who would slot in between 4th and 2nd line, depending. Foegele played a tiny bit on the 2nd line, not really much. So they lost 3 or 4 forwards, bit players. They replaced them with other people. At the end of the day, the adds and subtractions, they probably lost a little bit of D, which they really couldn't afford to, and probably gained even more offense. So that's it for your losses. As far as your additions, you got Victor Arvidsson, who, if he can stay healthy, could be a very good addition to the forward group. Has the ability to play up and down. And then Skinner, who they signed after Buffalo bought him out. Skinner can play easily up and down the line. He is a goal scorer. So, after basically after McDavid and Draisaitl, they kind of lack in that area. So he will be one who's expected to get your secondary scoring. He's the guy that they're looking to get their point production besides the top 2. They also got a Matt Savoy from Buffalo also. I don't think he makes the team this year, but he's, 3 years out of his draft class, drafted at number 9. So somebody who could be called up during the year. Also, they picked up Ty Everson, who they traded for Cody Ceci. they're figuring he will play one of the defensive positions, and then Josh Brown was another extremely big defenseman. So at the end of the day, there was turnover between bit players for the Edmonton Oilers. That's about it. They'll still pack a wallop. What we can hope for is, again, that we get the backup goaltender. We did go to Edmonton last year. So basically, if you're heading out that way, there's a ton of different places right by the stadium. The Ice House is where we spent most of our time. Your classic Oiler bar, you know, so good food, tons of beer on tap. We will give a shout out to in the downtown area, probably about 8-9 blocks away. We went to a place called the Gardens the night before. If you like us a little bit, you know, something, you know, not up there, a little bit of down-stepping class almost to where I call my people. Very good music, some bar food. Was a place called the Gardens. I would check that out. Besides that, just remember, Edmonton's really cold. Try to get a hotel where you can just walk the Skyway and get to the game. That's all I have on these two teams. I'll be reporting back.